This video will show you how to convert a Python list into a TensorFlow tensor using the TensorFlow Convert to Tensor functionality. First, we import TensorFlow as TF. Then we print out the version of TensorFlow we are using. We are using TensorFlow 1.8.0. Next, let's start out by defining a Python list that's composed of interior lists, and we assign this list to the Python variable initialPythonList. Let's print this initial Python list variable to see what it looks like. We can see that it is one long set of nested lists. Let's also do a type check of the variable to make sure it is a Python list. And we can see that the class is list, so bingo, it worked. What we want to do now is to convert this Python list to a TensorFlow tensor. To do this, we'll use the TensorFlow Convert to Tensor operation. So tf.convert_to_tensor, and we pass in our Python list. And the result of this operation will be assigned to the Python variable tensor from list. So we didn't get any errors, so let's see what happens when we print the tensor from the Python list variable. We see that it's a tensor, we see that it's a constant, we see that the shape is 2 by 2 by 4, so let's check it out. So 1, 2, so that's the first dimension, then 2 rows, that's the second dimension, and 1, 2, 3, 4 columns, that's the third dimension, and the data type is int32. Here I used all integers, I didn't use any floating point numbers, so that makes sense. One interesting thing about this conversion is that when we print it, like we just did, we can't actually see the data. So even though our initial Python list has been converted into a tensor, we can't actually see the data. This is because we're still in the building the TensorFlow graph phase rather than the actual evaluating the graph. So now that we've created our TensorFlow tensors, it's time to run the computational graph. We launch the graph in a session, and then we initialize all the global variables in the graph. So now that our variable has been initialized, let's print our tensor from list Python variable again, only this time in a TensorFlow session. So we do print and then session run and pass in our tensor from list. We can now see all the data that was in the original Python list. Perfect. We were able to convert a Python list into a TensorFlow tensor using the TensorFlow Convert to Tensor functionality.